Are you an overwhelmed SaaS founder ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where nothing happens until somebody sells something in a SaaS company. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you scale up and exit, creating premium valuation impact and enjoy the freedom you probably became an entrepreneur for, not someday, but today. Now, I was trying to think about how to start the show this week and reading some sales stories and info and more, and I saw a link that looked promising. It was 23 motivational sales quotes to fire you up. Like, hey, sounds good. Maybe there's something there. So I clicked on it and the page said, sorry, that does not seem to exist. And, I think a lot of SaaS founders relate to that, not just the broken link, but fired up about sales? Nah, that doesn't seem to exist. We all need sales and we know it, but there's often a mental block where founders tell me they don't like sales or they don't think they're any good at it. They're just like, hey, it's not my thing. And I would say that sales motivation, they might look at that and go, sales motivation, yeah, that page doesn't seem to exist. We have a mastermind group for SaaS founders called Executive Navigation. We meet in person several times a year. And at one meetup, we were breaking for lunch, and I did a quick preview of the afternoon agenda, and sales was a major topic. And at lunch, I was part of several of those, I'm no good at sales conversations. I'm some wanting to solve it and some preferring to outsource. Like, can't we just get somebody else to do it? And it's conversations went on. We talked about all sorts of different things. Went to movies, the best movie of all time. And everybody has an opinion, even you. And I'd love to hear what you think it is. What's your favorite movie of all time? The best ever. So send that over to me. It's a fun topic for group discussion. And if you want to create some controversy, this is a great question to ask in a group. Lots of great movies were thrown out and memorable quotes and people talking back and forth. It's such a good conversation. And one person mentioned the Shawshank Redemption. And a few others agreed. This is a great movie. But probably half the group hadn't seen it. It is, 25, 30 years old. But the person who floated it out, they gave it a synopsis. Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, they plot summary, a favorite scene. Others who had seen it joined in. Lots of enthusiasm around it. And the funny thing, within a few minutes, every single person who had seen the movie or who hadn't seen the movie was adding it to their watch list. And the crazy thing was the same person who recommended it was one of the same people who said he wasn't any good at sales. And that afternoon, we actually used this movie and in this conversation as an example and drew some parallels with SaaS sales, kind of the introduction of an idea, shifting beliefs, solving problems, testimonials, and just having a conversation. Sales doesn't have to be some weird thing. It's better if it isn't. Have a conversation like humans. And I shared a framework we call the Introvert Sales Map, and that was a game changer. That and the movie conversation really changed perspectives on what sales is, how it works. And what's funny is every single person left thinking that sales was something they could do and be good at. And don't get me wrong, it's not like, I'm going to be good instantly overnight, but pretty darn quick because I've got a map now. I've got a framework I can work from. So SaaS sales, I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living or get busy dying. The end of that story is that several of the people in the group had an Airbnb nearby and a 4-bedroom house, big pool in the back. And so the next night after we wrapped up our session, we went over there, about 50 of us, did a big barbecue in the backyard. And we all watched Shawshank Redemption together. Best movie ever? I don't know, maybe. Best time ever? Top 10 for sure. And that is one that I will absolutely never forget. And our guest today brings exceptional sales insights that layer perfectly on top of that introvert sales map. So today's episode is sponsored by Champion Leadership Group. Get free growth tools and map out a growth plan to scale your SaaS business beyond 10 million. Travel with fellow SaaS entrepreneurs on your growth journey and use a proven methodology that is mentor guided, results focused, and peer supported. Celebrate wins quickly and rebound from setbacks and achieve profitable growth, impact, and freedom. Unleash your SaaS growth at championleadership.com. Earlier this week in our founder episode, we talked with Hugo Sanchez, founder and CEO of RThreat, a cybersecurity company that is revolutionizing the way SaaS founders think about and protect applications from threats that we know about and those that we don't yet. And last week's expert was Irvin Ang, a marketing strategist whose expertise is re-energizing email lists and turning them into interested leads. So if you missed either one of those, go back and give them a listen. My current guest today is Jeremy Miner, founder of Seventh Level, the fastest growing sales training company in the US according to the Inc. 5000 list. Jason went from a middle of the road salesperson to being ranked internationally as one of the top 50 highest paid direct salespeople in the world. His transformation came by applying his behavioral science background to the sales process. The result was revenue skyrocketing and a natural process that felt really good for both buyer and seller. Today, Jeremy helps us all up-level our sales game, even if you don't think sales is your thing. Welcome the guy who can make it your thing, Jeremy Miner. Well, hey, Jeremy, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Jeff, hey, thanks for the kind words. I'm going to take everything you just said about me as a compliment because my kids say I'm really, really boring. So I'm here. I'm traveling this week. I'm here in got a lake house here in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. You ever watch that Netflix show with Jason Bateman, the Ozark?
Yes,
show?
Ozark. Yes.
There you go. Like I'm right down the road from where they filmed that first season. Most of it's filmed outside of the lake now, but that's the star-powered Lake of the Ozarks. I'm here for another week, just enjoying some of the fall weather.
That is fantastic. It's a good place to be.
It's not bad. Come here in the summer; it's even better. So let's roll. Let's do this today. I'm thank you for having me on your podcast. I know you serve a lot of people there, and let's see what we can do for them.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that is really interesting is your sales background, and you have a really different take on sales than kind of the traditional way.
Yeah.
And so, tell me a little bit about sales and NEPQ and why it's different.
Well, we think outside the box. So in my company, Seventh Level, we want to use techniques that actually work with human behavior rather than work against it. All right. So if we're still using, techniques and saying the same things and asking the same boring, static, surface level questions that have been around since the dinosaur ages of selling, well, today's consumer is not like they were even 5 years ago or 10 or 20 or especially 50. 60, 70 years ago. So a lot of salespeople, when they come to us and companies come to us, they're like, why are our numbers just staying stagnant? Or why can we not double, triple, quadruple what we're doing? But there's a reason why that is. It's not because your product or service is not solving problems, right? It's not like it can't get them where they want to go, but it's how you're communicating that to your prospects that's actually triggering them to emotionally shut down and run the other way and stay in the status quo, and nothing ever changes for them. See what I mean by that?
Yes.
So
yes.
What I can do, it might make more sense if I kind of break down kind of where sales is really at. So my background in college was human behavior, was behavioral science and human psychology. That's what I actually majored in, the boring nerd stuff, all right? And according to behavioral science, and if you really think about what behavioral science is, because I know that's kind of a term that's just kind of out there, but somebody really know what that means. Behavioral science, if you break it down, is really the study of the brain. And it's why a human being makes a decision to do one thing or do another. And in sales, that kind of might be important that we understand if we're triggering something that's causing our prospects not to purchase from us, that if we just change some wording and we change our questions and our tonality, would trigger them on the opposite end to actually buy from us. All right.
Right.
So according to the science, there are three forms of communication. All right. And I would suggest all of you guys that are listening to us right now, write this down, because once you understand the differences in persuasion and where you are now in your current sales ability, even if you're doing good compared to where you could be, it'll completely change everything for you. All right. So the first mode of communication, and I'm not going to give the scientific terms. I'm just going to give terms that probably everybody on here would know. So if I said to you, Jeff, if I said, what's the first image that comes in your mind when I say boiler room selling, what would that image be?
A boiler room.
Yeah, it'd be like, the shows, Gordon Gekko, Wolf on Wall Street. You see them all back there smiling and dialing. manipulating, pressuring. So according to the science, we are actually the least persuasive when we tell people things or we attempt to dominate them or posture them, push them into doing something we want them to do. Okay.
That pushes them away. I mean, we think that kind of that's the old school selling way is I can make them do this. It's the hammer, but it does. It pushes them away.
And for most prospects, especially in your space, it's just going to push them away.
Yeah.
Right. It just will. It's just human behavior. Like if you tell your spouse, if you're married or if you have kids or teenagers, that they really, really need to do something for you, and then you pressure and push them, what do they typically do back?
They're going to push back.
They push back. See, here's the thing. We're all taught that you have to have a great presentation. You have to show them the slide decks, go 60 minutes, 90 minutes. We have the best this, we have the best that. We've got the best customer service awards. Here's our JD and Power Associates awards. Here's our great quality awards. Here's our corporate office, the picture of it. Here's the pictures of our founders, which, by the way, doesn't every single salesperson who's ever sold anything to you say they have the best product or service?
Oh, always.
How many salespeople, and I'm not saying you would do this, but how many salespeople come up to you and say, "Oh yeah, we've got the 5th best service in the market, Jeff"? Nobody,
Zero.
Right?
Yeah, nobody does that. They all have the best service. Yeah, that's their big differentiator, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't go and say that you have the best or that you're the 5th. You keep it more neutral, right? So we can talk about that in a second. So when you say things like, we have the best this, we have the best that, your prospects, just so you understand, everybody, psychologically, according to the data, trust you less than if you didn't say that.
It's true.
Especially if you talk down about your competitors. And why is that? Because they are quite literally used to every single salesperson who sold them anything from a vacuum cleaner to a car to some type of, software or SaaS or anything like that, telling them that they have the best. So they psychologically, emotionally shut down because they feel like it's just a sales tactic, right? So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentation is more than 10% of your entire sales process. And here's the problem. Average salespeople in any industry, we train 158 different industries. Yours is one of them, okay? The average salesperson presents half of the time. And that's a major issue, all right? So we have to hone that down to more 10%. We can talk about that later. It's a whole nother training. Now, telling your story. Hate to tell you this. Nobody cares about your story when you're selling one-to-one. Whose story do they care about?
Their own.
Story, right? Yeah. It's just common sense, right? Even a sales pitch, we've all been taught you got a great pitch. You ever watch CNBC Shark Tank?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, at least. So I think everybody does. So I want you to watch when the entrepreneurs come out and they're all excited, all enthusiastic, just pitching everything. Take a look at the body language of the sharks, like Mr. Wonderful, when they're pitching, okay? Mark Cuban, Barbara, Damon John, like you can watch where they're like, whoa, like it's just, you got to get rid of the pitch, right? No, hashtag ditch the pitch. Putting sales pressure on them. And here's the big one, assuming the sale, especially early on in the conversation, according to the data, very low on the persuasion poll. And hence, that's where we believe that the term sales is a numbers game came from. Like, who invented that saying? Did just somebody wake up one day 300 years ago and say, sales is a numbers game? Well, it's a numbers game because of the way you're communicating, which is triggering your prospects to run the other way. That's really what that means.
Right. It means you're bad at selling.
It means you're really
you got to have a whole bunch of no's to get to that yes. I mean, why would you need that?
Have more higher quality conversations and learn how to convert 3 or 4 times higher. You're not going to make every sale, but instead of getting, I'm just throwing out random numbers, instead of getting 1 or 2 out of 10, why not learn advanced sales skills where you're getting 5 or 6 or 7 out of 10?
Exactly.
It only takes the numbers lingo out of there, right? It's like the hustle muscle, just work until you get a yes. Well, I guess you can. It sounds more like a manual labor job, but why not learn more advanced skills where you convert 3 or 4 times more people and you can work less and make a lot more money? I don't know, call me crazy. I don't know. So that's the first era of selling, all right? Now, the second era of selling is more known as, I'll give kind of the term everybody would know on here, consultative selling. Everybody knows what that means, right?
Right.
So we're more persuasive when we have a discussion, all right? And consultative selling came out mainly in the 80s, 90s. Books like, Sandler, Spin Selling, where they taught you how to ask logical-based questions to find the needs of the client. But what's the potential? And that was a game changer back in the 80s.
Yes, it was.
compared to Wolf on Wall Street type of selling. But what's a potential downfall of this approach when you're only asking logical-based surface level questions?
Well, you're not involving the emotional side for sure.
Right.
And most of the time you're driving to an outcome, and they know that you're doing that. It's not a genuine question. It's not a conversation. You're asking me something to get an answer to get to where you want.
Yeah, you're not triggering their emotional drivers.
Yeah.
And that's where the sales made it. We'll talk about that. Like, how do you get them in their emotional state? Because as you know, if you ask surface level logical based questions, the prospect gives you a logical based surface level answer back. And do human beings buy on logic or emotion? We all know it's emotion. There's no debate in behavioral science on that at this point, okay?
Right.
So when you're asking questions like, oh, so Sally, tell me 2 things that's keeping you awake at night.
Terrible question.
Your prospects have heard that 3 billion times. They're just going to shut down, most of them, unless they're on lay down, okay? Can you tell me 2 challenges you're having, or who besides you is going to be involved in this decision early in the conversation? Most of your prospects aren't going to open up to those type of questions. So you might want to re-language that. If you're trying to find out who the other decision makers, you might want to say, for instance, like this, Sally, can you walk me through your company's like decision-making process when it comes to solving problems like this?
Very good.
It's more bringing out a conversation rather than who besides you would be involved in this. Like, people don't open up to those type of surface level questions. Okay. So that's just a few examples. Or if you're asking like, what sort of budget do you have set aside for this type of thing early in the conversation? Well, here's the problem. Most of your prospects, 99% of them, don't even know what their real problems are at that point in the conversation.
True.
So how would they know what to budget for something that they don't even really know is really that wrong in the beginning, right? So when you ask that type of questions, it pigeonholes you in where you have to stay in the small budget, and the prospect doesn't even realize that not only do they have one problem they thought they had, but now they have 4 or 5 other problems, and there's massive consequences if they don't do anything, all right? So it's more, consultative selling is more persuasive than like boiler room selling, pressuring, hard closing, assumptive techniques. But you're still playing the numbers game because you're not, like you said, you're not really bringing out very much emotion for them to go below the surface. And that's where the sales really made, right? Now, the third mode of communication is more known, I'll give you the non-scientific term, would be more known as dialogue, okay? So we're the most persuasive when we get a prospect to persuade themselves by asking what we call, like you mentioned, neuro-emotional persuasion questions. That stands for NEPQ. And that's always the $1 trillion, we have to speak in trillions these days, not billions.
Right.
That's the $1 trillion question that people will ask me on stage. You'll be like, well, how do I do that? How do I get somebody to persuade themselves? Because as you know, you can't just show up and say, hey, John, persuade yourself. And by the way, my assistant will email out our wire. You have to learn how to do that. You have to learn specific skilled questions and when to ask those in that conversation, okay, and how to get them to go below the surface, and really the right tone. Is your tone on certain questions more skeptical? Is it more cautious? Is it more concerned? Is it more curious? Because there's certain parts of that conversation where you have to ask it in a different tone to solicit a different type of answer and get that prospect to where you're wanting them to go and really to help them get where they want to go, right? So those are the 3 forms. You with me on that?
Yes.
Bunch of boring nerd stuff.
Well, that's important. A lot of people
sell more, it's probably important.
Yes. I think a lot of people think, emotion makes sense in B2C, but how does emotion fit into B2B selling? Is there an emotional component?
Okay, so in my 17-year sales career, all right, so I made on average, like if you look up my name or something, I made multiple 7 figures a year in commissions on average in my 17-year sales career. Now, 2 of those, I was in 4 different industries. Okay, so about 4.5 years per industry, give or take a few months on average, all right? 2 of them were B2C sales, okay, more high ticket items B2C, and then 2 of them were B2B, okay? And I'm going to tell you, like, I even spoke in one B2B organization that I sold into to like large enterprise accounts, to like CEOs of major companies where I was doing $5, $10, $20 million deals, okay? And I can tell you, if you know how to really ask the right questions with the right tone and how to bridge from question to question where it sounds natural and not scripted. Here's what I mean by that. So John, tell me what two problems you have, and they start talking, and you just sit back and you go, and then at the end they're like, okay, cool, awesome, awesome. Let me ask you. See, that sounds scripted.
Yes.
But if I ask a question and I use what's called verbal cues. Now, verbal cues, I know they sound so easy, but 99% of salespeople have no idea how to use them. Verbal cues, when the prospect's talking, you're doing this. Uh-huh. Ah, okay. Right. I see, but I'm not understanding. And then boom. See how I use that verbal cue? Uh-huh. But help me understand. See, verbal cue, question. When you have a verbal cue and you go right into the next question, it sounds natural. It sounds conversational. It doesn't sound scripted.
Right.
So in the prospect's mind, they feel comfortable because they feel like it's a normal conversation. Now, it's not a conversation where you're just talking about the weather and who won the game last night. That doesn't help you or them. It's a skilled conversation, but it's just like a Hollywood actor, actress. Like everything that you see the actor, actress say in that movie is what? 100% scripted.
Right.
But does it sound scripted to you?
No, that's why they're great actors, just because it's a very natural presentation.
Yeah, it sounds natural.
Yeah.
And that's because they memorize their lines. But the problem is that most salespeople never memorize their lines. They don't take it serious enough to memorize the questions they're going to ask and know how to ask them in the tone and different fluctuations. Like, look, if you want to make hundreds of thousands a year in commissions, or if you're a business owner and you want to scale your company, let's say you're doing 10 or 20 million a year, but you're like, how do I go to 50 million a year or 100 million a year or 200 million a year? Well, your salespeople are going to have to learn more advanced skills because what they're saying and asking now has gotten you to this certain point. But how can it double your revenue by them saying the same things? What, are you just going to double the lead flow? Well, I guess you can reduce your profit margin greatly, but I'd rather teach my salespeople how to communicate the most effectively. So instead of this closing rate, they now double their closing percentage.
Right.
Then you spend less money on leads, right? So instead of your salespeople complaining about the leads, they start to internalize like, okay, what am I saying and not asking that's triggering these leads I'm getting to not buy from us? Now, once I change that, it changed the conversation, right? So now they're not focused on these are all bad, sucky leads. They're like, what am I saying? What am I not asking that's causing these leads not to purchase what I'm offering? Because they have problems. My solution can solve them. So what's the missing link? The missing link is what we're saying and not asking that's causing the prospect to not purchase from us. That's the missing link.
Makes sense.
If we change the missing link, everything changes for us. So when you start to memorize your question ability, and you start to really rehearse and practice your tonality, that's why top 1% earning salespeople get paid the most, because they take it seriously. Right? So if you're an average salesperson, how do you go from average to good and then good to great and then great to legendary? Well, you have to take your profession seriously and spend some time on developing those skills. That's the main difference.
So a lot of the founders we work with have a technical background. It's not sales and marketing. And so, sales is maybe a little bit foreign to them. What advice would you have about, them learning to sell and asking those right questions?
Well, here's what we all have to understand. Your prospects, and everybody on here has probably heard of the ABCs of closing, right? Always be closing,
Yeah, right.
Especially
coffee's for closers.
Yeah, especially in your industry, which is more of a complex selling environment. It's usually not just a one-call close, and you throw them over your back and never talk to them again. It's a sale that's more, takes a little bit longer, right? You might have a 2-call close in your industry, or 3 or 4-call close, depending on the size of the deal. And if you're selling to more SMB or more, startups, or if you're selling more to enterprise, there's going to be some differences, obviously, in that sales process. Sure. But it's learning how to become what we call a problem finder and problem solver, not a product pusher. Now, what we find when most companies bring us in, and I'm even talking enterprise Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies bring us in to do audits on their salespeople, is that most of their salespeople are what we call product pushers. Here's what I mean by that. They know everything. They do a lot of product training, right? Sure. Like one of our largest clients is Google Ads. Like we train 4 of their largest divisions, okay? Inbound, outbound, the cloud, all that kind of stuff. And when we came in and did an audit of those divisions, they thought they were doing sales training, because I asked them, like, walk me through, like, if I came to work for you today as a new salesperson, what would my sales training look like? And they're like, oh, we're going to teach you about this product, and we're going to bring in this specialist that shows you how the AdWords campaigns work, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm talking about like sales training, not product training.
Right.
They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what are they asking to trigger their emotional drivers? What are they asking? What tonality training are you teaching them? And at the end of the day, there really was none. They had like a script, like a 3-paragraph script, and it sounded like a telemarketing script, right? So product pushing is you're asking a couple of generic questions, like we talked about, the consultative questions, and they tell you a problem. Oh, let me tell you how we solve that. And you go right into your sales pitch, and then or presentation or demo. And then we're bewildered at the end of that when they're like, well, we need some time to think this over. We don't make rash decisions. We need to keep doing more research. We're looking for some other quotes. We're still talking with other companies. And you're like, I don't even understand. They have the problem. We have the solution.
Right.
It's because you're a product pusher, right? It's like taking a bucket of mud, an equivalent, and like throwing it up against the wall and hoping and praying something we showed them in our slide deck is going to magically trigger them to want to buy. And we call that hopium. It's a drug, seriously, a drug that so many companies and salespeople take where they hope and pray something on their slides is going to trigger that prospect to want to buy. So we want to learn how to become problem finders. Now, it's not even enough to become a problem solver, because really any sales book that you will ever read will say you have to be really good at problem solving. But in reality, you can't solve their problems until they what? Until they buy from you.
Right.
So you can't be a problem solver until they purchase your product or service, because then you solve their problem.
Right.
So you have to be better at what's called problem finding. Okay. And that means helping them find problems in their mind from your questioning ability that they didn't even know they had. Because when you first get on a call, and you know this, if you get on Zoom or if you're in person with them or if you're on a phone call with them, most of your prospects, even if they booked on your calendar, don't even really know they have a problem. Or maybe they know they have a problem, but they're not really quite sure how bad the problem really is.
Sure.
Or maybe they don't understand the consequences of what happens if they don't do anything about solving their problem. Now, once you learn NEPQ, like we're talking neuro, emotional, persuasion, which you learn the right tonality with that, not only can you trigger the prospect to come up with one problem in their mind, but now you're able to help them find maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other problems they didn't realize they had. And when you're able to help them see what their real problems are, and that's not by telling them. If you tell them what their problems are, that goes in one ear, out the other.
Right.
You're biased. You're the salesperson, right? They don't believe you, but your questioning ability allows them to tell themselves what their problem is. And the more reasons why they give themselves on what their problems are and the root cause and how it's affecting them, the more urgency it brings into their mind, their conscious mind, to buy now, not later. So you want to become a problem finder, problem solver, not a product pusher. As an entrepreneur, when you learn that, selling actually becomes very fulfilling because your prospects let their guard down. They become open to you, and it becomes very, very easy, and it becomes extremely profitable for you because your prospects, once you learn how to become problem finder over a product pusher, they start to view you differently. They don't view you like all these other salespeople out there calling every day trying to sell them something. They put them all over in the corner and commoditize them. They view you as the expert. They view you as the trusted authority who understands their unique situation the most. And who do you think your prospect's going to buy from? The salesperson who they feel understands their unique situation the most, or just some other salesperson that's just, wheeling and dealing trying to sell them something? Of course, we know the answer. They will likely pay way more if they feel you understand their situation the most.
100%.
Feel like you can get them the best result, and they'll pay for that 100% every time.
We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to ask Jeremy about NEPQ and dig more into that. We'll find out about how to create demos that convert and how to hire a fantastic sales team right after this.
Feeling stuck? Hit a growth ceiling? Break free and get growth moving with Champion Leadership Group. Our team of SaaS growth experts works with you to quickly identify and solve 53 root causes for stalled revenue growth. And then we keep revenue soaring with 268 powerful SaaS-specific growth strategies. Many cost nothing and can be implemented in a day. Use them to blow through growth ceilings and keep revenue rocking. Best of all, you never have to walk alone. Our group of mentors and fellow SaaS founders is here to support you on your SaaS building entrepreneurial journey. Get free SaaS growth tools, including your own custom growth game plan at championleadership.com.
Welcome back to SaaS Fuel. My guest today, Jeremy Miner, founder and chairman of Seventh Level. And so, Jeremy, tell me a little bit more about NEPQ. How does it work? And what are the steps?
Okay, so let's talk about the stages of your sales process. So let's just break them down stage to stage. All right. So whether you do outbound leads, like you're calling, a company or a C-level executive or whatever, whoever it is that's responded to some type of ad on social media or search engines or whatever, that would be more like an outbound lead. They put in their name, their phone number, their contact details. They don't know who's calling them or when, but they know somebody's calling them. That would be considered an outbound lead. Okay. An inbound lead would be considered somebody who has booked on your calendar, right? And they know that they're showing up for some type of meeting on Zoom or in person in the office, whatever it is,
right,
in the home, depends on what you sell. Okay. And then you have cold calling, which is you're calling businesses, right? Trying to engage them and get them curious enough to want to have a conversation around their problems and how you can possibly solve them with your solution. So in the first stage, we want to learn what are called connecting questions. All right. Now, connecting questions take the focus off you, the salesperson or the entrepreneur, if you're still making the calls, maybe you're a smaller company, and it puts the focus on your prospect immediately. Okay. Because what we have to understand is that psychologically in a human being's brain, okay, within the first 5 to 12 seconds, like this happens very quickly, your prospect subconsciously is picking up on your social cues from you, even if you're on the phone, okay, and they can't see it, okay? They're picking up on your verbal and nonverbal cues based off your tonality and what you are saying and or asking and how you're saying it, like your tone, that trigger their brain to react in one of two ways. This is kind of scary stuff if we don't understand that we could be triggering resistance instead of triggering curiosity. Because, Jeff, like if you go to a networking event, and somebody comes up and starts talking to you, or you start talking to somebody else, what are you immediately doing? What's going on in your mind?
We're deciding if they're a friend or foe. I want to know, is this somebody that I want to connect with or run away from?
And do you know why? That's because that's the part of the reptilian part of our brain.
Sure.
Okay? So as a human being, the way we're designed from primitive days, whether that was 10,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago or whatever that was, is that, we're trying to protect ourselves from our foes. That could have been like a saber-toothed tiger or whatever, like a lion or whatever, a snake, right? So what we're doing as a human being now in our environment is that we've been conditioned from a lot of advertising and a lot of salespeople. When we feel like somebody is trying to sell us something, the guard goes up very quickly.
It does, yes.
Am I right? So
Yep.
we're triggered that way. Okay. So as a salesperson or as a business owner, we have to understand that, because if we can stop acting like a seller and start thinking more like a buyer, well, we get on the buyer's page in their shoes, and it really helps us open them up. Right. So because if we come across in our sales conversations, if we come across aggressive, like posturing them, trying to manipulate them, if we come across over enthusiastic, if we come across like, hey, like a used car salesman, right?
Right.
Especially when you're talking to, in B2B sales, like especially that, even B2C for sure. If you come across needy, everybody knows what I mean. You can tell when a salesperson's needy on the other line, right? Or if you come across attached, and everybody knows what I mean by that. And you don't understand the right questions to ask. You don't understand the right tone, especially in the beginning of a call. You're going to trigger your prospects to go into what's called fight or flight mode. Now, everybody has heard fight or flight mode, but what we find is that most people don't know what triggers it or what it even, they hear the term, but they don't really conceptually understand what it means, okay? Fight mode means that your prospect does this. Hey, I'm not interested. Like, we already have somebody for that. I'm good. And it's like the hand is up.
Right.
They're like very quick, or they're like, hey, I don't have time for this. Just email me a quote, email me your, a proposal, and I'll get back to you if we're interested. And they're saying that within like the first minute. That's because you triggered fight mode. Now, when you trigger flight mode, what the prospect does is they're like, okay, yeah, and they act a little bit interested. They kind of stay surface level throughout the conversation. And then at the end, they're like, oh, this is really interesting. send me some more information. Let's set up another time. They never show up to that next call or demo, right? And then you email them, you text them, you call them, and suddenly they just go MIA, like witness protection mode. They've moved to freaking, upstate Alaska, and you never hear from them. They're gone. That's because you triggered flight mode, all right? So your prospects try to get rid of you. Now, if you're a business owner, salesperson that wants to be very, very successful, you want to trigger engagement and curiosity, okay? So in your conversations within that first 7 to 12 seconds, and really throughout the entire sales process, whether that's a 1-call close, 2-call close, 5-call close, whatever it is, depending on who you're selling to, what type of environment you're in, you want to come across unbiased in that conversation, especially in the beginning, more neutral. You're not quite sure if you can even help yet. You don't know anything about what their situation is, right? You come across more collective, calm. You come across more detached. And you understand the right questions to ask with the right tone for different situations. It triggers the prospect on the other end, their brain, to become curious enough where they feel like they want to engage. They want to open up to you because they feel that you might have something important for them. They're not quite sure what it is yet, but they feel that there's something important there. That's called triggering engagement, right? So we want to come across in the beginning, we want to ask what are called connecting questions. That was a long explanation, but needed, that trigger them to want to engage and open up. Now, right after we've done that, we want to ask what are called situation questions. Situation questions help you and the prospect find out what the real situation is. Like, what is the real situation? Because if we can't help them find out what their real situation is, we call that their current state. We can't build a gap from where they are to where they want to be if we can't help them find out where they are. Because most of your prospects don't really know where they're. They might have an idea, but they don't really know fully, right? Then after that, we want to ask what are called problem awareness questions. So connecting questions, situation questions, and then problem awareness questions. Now, problem awareness questions help start building a gap, okay? What are the real problems? Not just surface level problems. What are the real problems? What's the root cause of the problem? Like what's causing the problem? What's behind it? Right. Most of those people don't know how to ask those questions. They're too scared to find out what caused the problem, like the root cause. Okay, that helps the prospect internalize that, right? Because if they don't internalize their problems, they're not buying. I hate to tell you that. Very rare, okay? And then we want to help them see how the problem's affecting them even personally. Those are problem awareness questions. That starts building the gap, okay? Now, so we got connecting questions, situation questions, problem awareness. Fourth type of stage we go into then is what is called, and this can all happen in 15 minutes of a conversation. Sure. It's not like a 3-hour process, okay? Then we go into what's called solution awareness questions, that once they see what the current situation is, you've now started to build a gap from your problem awareness questions. Now they start seeing, and most importantly, feeling what their situation is going to look like once all these newfound problems that your question building has allowed them to see they had, that they didn't know before. So now they're thinking about what their objective is, like what their future is going to look like once all these newfound problems are solved. That's called their objective states. We have current state, objective state, okay? Now, once they start feeling and telling you how it's going to be different for them once these problems are solved and they get what they want, we then want to rip it away from them with what's called a consequence question, which gets them to see and feel what the consequences or ramifications are if they don't do anything about solving this newfound problem. Right. Okay? That gets them to defend themselves on why they need to change now. Is that something that you might want them to do on your sales calls? Defend themselves 100%. On why they need to change? Yes. Now you're triggering their emotional drivers. You're getting them into their emotional state where buying decisions happen magically. It's like Peter Pan. We're in Never Never Land. We've figured it out. We are here, right? We've gone through the matrix. We know what's going on. And then once we do that, like it depends. Like let's say if you're in a 2 or 3 call close, after you've asked that consequence question, you're then going to transition into booking maybe that demo. You know, if you're selling SaaS or something, you're probably going to do some type of demo. So you're going to book the demo. But they've done that. They've triggered so much emotion. They see that they have massive problems. They see what the future is going to look like. So when you go to book the demo, guess what? They actually want to book the demo. And guess what? Most of them show up to the demo. Right. Or if they don't show up, they're calling, they're messaging like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I want to do this, but I need to reschedule. You don't have 60% of them going MIA because you didn't build any gap. Okay.
Because they're emotionally attached to the solution at that point. They know they have a problem. They know they want to solve it, and they can't sit in that state.
They cannot, because human behavior tells us that people want to move away from pain.
Right.
And if you can't get them to feel pain, well, what are they going to move away from? Right? They're either moving away from pain and they're moving to gain, right? There's two different things there. Most of it's pain to then get the gain, right? So they actually show up. And in the demo, when we go through the demo, that presentation, we're not just showing them the features and the bells and the whistles that's going to go in one ear out the other and over their head for most people. But we're focused on the problems they brought up in that discovery call, and then how this part of the solution solves that problem. Nothing less, nothing more, okay? And then we're going to ask, let's say for a 2-call close, because some companies in your space might close after that demo, or maybe they do the demo and then they schedule a third meeting for a proposal. It just depends on if you're selling more enterprise or more, small business, right? And then we're going to ask, when we get to that end stage, whatever that is, we're going to ask what are called commitment questions. We don't like to use the word closing. Closing demeans people. It's like, oh, I'm a closer.
Yeah.
Like, stop the closing stuff. Like, selling is not adversarial. You against a prospect trying to win them over so you can make money. That's what average salespeople think. If you want to be a top 1% salesperson earning, or a top 1% business owner making hundreds of millions of dollars a year or more, you have to think that selling is collaborative. You working with the prospects to help them find and solve problems they didn't even know they had. So we're going to ask what are called commitment questions that get them to commit to take the next step and purchase your solution to get them where they want to be. And that is the 7 stages of neuro-emotional persuasion question.
I like that. And really bringing them through the demo and connecting that to their pain. And so it's not just a big product tour of, feature, stop me if you see something you like, but it's actually they're invested and you're solving that pain for them through the solution.
Yeah, so you can say, like, so John, do you remember how you were saying that you were having XYZ problem, which is causing you to ABC, whatever the consequence was? So one of the biggest problems that people have when they come to us is exactly the same thing you said.
Right.
They don't know how to XYZ, which is causing them to ABC. So the way we solve that is, and then you go over specifically how your solution solves that problem. And then at the end of that, you say, now what that means to you is, and then you go over the advantages of benefits of what it means for them. And when you go through that structure, it emotionally connects the dots from their problem to where they want to be, and they see how they can get there. So what that does is it triggers certainty in their brain that they feel like you're going to get them the results. The reason why you get so many objections at the end of your demos or presentations or whatever you're trying to do is because you haven't built a big enough gap, so they have uncertainty in their mind. Right. You can really get them where they want to go. And part of that is they're uncertain about their real situation. They're uncertain about what their real problems are. They're not quite sure if they even have a problem because you're not able to bring that out of them. And it triggers uncertainty. And that's when they don't make buying behavior 101. Human beings don't make buying decisions when they have uncertainty in their brain, especially if it's a more higher priced solution. They just won't.
Right. I think a lot of times we have knowledge that they don't. And so we connect the dots in our brains, but we don't help them connect the dots. We just think that they're thinking the same thing that we are.
Yeah. And that's a massive problem. That's why you're not selling like you could be 100%.
Is there something that somebody can do if they're, relatively new to selling, or what is, the first step that they should take in implementing something like this? I mean, making changes in gradual steps, not just taking an entire process and trying to do that all at once. What is something that they can do as a starting point? Yeah,
good place to start. Like if you ever want to learn how to sell that way, like working with human behavior, have them just go to one of our free Facebook groups. We have some resources in there that can kind of be a good start for them. If they ever want to get into more advanced training, they obviously can reach out to us in that Facebook group. But there's a Facebook group I think we sent you. It's salesrevolution.pro. So you go to sales. Yeah, just have them go to salesrevolution.pro. And right when they join, somebody on my team, one of my stunt doubles or surrogates, have them check their DMs, Facebook Messenger, and they'll message them over a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course. It's our CEO, Matt Ryder, that breaks down NEPQ more in detail than I just did, with certain questions they can use for different situations. That alone will probably help them sell more. And we typically go live in that Facebook group maybe 3-4 times a week. I think we got about 38,000 people in there. A lot of them are in your guys' industry, but SaaS is one of probably we train 158 different industries. I would say SaaS is probably one of the top 20 industries that we train.
That's great.
From. And so they can always learn more about what we do by messaging somebody in there in that Facebook group for sure. That's one of our team members or something. So I just have them start there. Probably
that's great. And we'll make sure and link that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So if a CEO is looking at hiring a sales team, maybe it's their first sales hire, or maybe they have a few sales team members and they're looking for like a VP of sales. What is it that they should look for? I think hiring sales is one of the hardest hires to make. How do you know if you have somebody good versus great versus average?
I'm not really big on personality tests, and here's why. In my first sales job, the interview I got, I took a personality test and I failed, and they didn't hire me. And
like, you didn't have a personality? I mean, you just failed it?
Yeah, and 3 years later, I was ranked internationally in being a top 50 salesperson by the Direct Selling Association out of over 100 million salespeople.
That's pretty good.
3 years later. But I flunked the first job test. The personality test failed me because I'm not an introvert and I'm not an extrovert. I'm like an ambivert, somebody in the middle. So I was like, that's so interesting. I wonder how many salespeople might be like massively successful, but they fail these personality tests. And I think that the personality tests are built on a false premise that the more enthusiastic you are, the more outgoing you are, translates into sales success. Now, obviously, we train tens of thousands of people that are extroverted that make tons of money.
Sure.
But we train just as many introverts that make just as much money as them or more, because questioning skills and tonality skills and listening skills, that doesn't mean you have the gift of the gab. In fact, it means the opposite. Typically, what we see when we have somebody that's extremely extroverted, we have to like slow them down because they talk too much and they actually talk themselves out of the sale. So it's a myth to say like, oh, they got the gift of the gab. They could sell ice to an Eskimo. Well, first of all, you would never want to sell ice to an Eskimo. No pun intended. You'd want to sell them something more, maybe boots or coats or like, a nice warm home. Like, that's not what they need. They don't need ice, right? So no pun intended when I say that. I'm just giving you kind of an analogy there. So typically, like when we train somebody that's introverted, it's really easy for them to pick up NEPQ because it's a step-by-step structure. And all they have to do is learn different questions because we show them how to tweak them for their industry. And then we teach them verbal pauses, verbal cues, tonality. And an introverted person can pick that up just as well as an extroverted or an ambivert person. So I'm not really big on personality tests because I think a lot of companies miss really good salespeople, including myself. I wonder where that company would have been that could have hired me compared to the next one that did. Because they made a lot of money. They eventually sold to Blackstone for $2.3 billion. I was part of that process. All right. So that's the biggest thing. And the second biggest thing, I think, is you want to look for somebody that's very serious about their sales career. They're not just in sales so they can get in sales and all. They don't really like it and then they want to be a manager. Because those people are just doing enough to get by to be a manager. They don't really like sales. So when we hire people or when we train companies to hire people, we ask the employer to say, how much money did you personally spend or like invest in learning more advanced skills last year so you could sell more? And if that person's like, well, I bought a book for $25 and the company hired some guru to come in for 2 days.
Right.
Probably, unless they have a massively successful track record, we're probably not going to hire them compared to the salesperson's like, hey, I spent $3,000 on this course. I went to 3 events. The company brought in a trainer. I bought 12 books. See, that shows us that person is serious about the sales profession.
They're committed to their craft.
Committed to their craft. And that's who we want to hire.
Yes.
Because somebody who's not investing in their skill level is like a neurosurgeon that doesn't take updated classes to learn how to do brain surgery better.
Right.
They just go to medical school and then they're done. Training is not something you did. Training is something you do.
Yes.
You want to be great. Like Tiger Woods trains every day. LeBron James trains every day. Michael Jordan trained every day. That's why they were great. That's how they outpaced everybody else, because they trained harder. So as a sales professional, you want to make a lot of money. You want to train harder than everybody else. So as an employer, those are really 2 big things that we pick up on for sure.
And I really appreciate the comments about introverts. I had a conversation last week with somebody that, I don't know if I can do that because I'm an introvert. I'm like, well, of course you can. But this is a methodology that they can apply. So it's not just, personality, either way, but you can apply this no matter what you classify yourself as.
Well, everybody always wonders, how 7 Level, because we're a younger company, but with our revenues, we're already ranked as probably a top 6 sales training company in the United States with how much revenue we're already doing at this point. Inc. magazine ranked us the fastest growing sales training company in 2021 and 2020. There's a reason for that. We're getting duplication in every industry we go into. Not just like, they can really do good in insurance because Jeremy sold insurance, but they can't train car salespeople. That's what you see in most sales training because they're more personality type of training. Personality doesn't really matter. Like it's human behavior. It's like your process. It's like what questions you're asking at the right time for what situation and the tone. And anybody can learn that. So nobody is born a natural made salesperson. That is like a freaking myth. Nobody's born out of their mother's womb with advanced questioning skills,
right?
Advanced tonality skills, with advanced listening skills. Those are skills you acquire. So if you can acquire those skills, that means anyone can do that. And that's why we get duplication in every industry we go into, including your industry as well. So hopefully that answers the question for sure.
Yes. I think that's really good. And so we've talked some about those that don't know sales really well, but you've had experience with those who know sales really well, including your CEO. I mean, how did he become your CEO? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, typically we hire everybody internally. Typically they're clients of ours because we know that they understand the methodology and they've proven themselves with the methodology. They're making a ton of money or whatever. So my CEO was one of our first clients like 3 years ago. Okay, it was just me and my assistant and a salesperson. He had a bunch of gyms. Okay, they were doing okay. We came in, changed our sales process to NBQ. They quadrupled their sales in 90 days. And then 7 months later, he sold those. And I'm like, hey, how do I get this guy to come over and be the CEO of my business? Because he's exceptionally talented at running companies and building them. Okay, I have the sales training. He has the business building skills. And so that's how he came over as my business partner and CEO. And then one of our other clients, his name's Marco Cortese. He's our chief revenue officer now. But 3 years ago, he was a struggling salesperson making about $5-6 grand a month in commissions, selling fitness packages or something, like B2C fitness. And
that's tough.
Well, it's not if you learn the right skills.
There you go. I love that.
Because people need to lose weight because they could die. They could die if they. Quite literally, it's an emotional sale.
Life-changing.
Life-changing, right? So basically, he went from making about $5 grand a month in commissions, and about 4 months later, he went to making about 30 grand a month in commissions. About 4 months later, he was making about 70 grand a month in commissions, selling the same thing. And we're like, hey, we like this kid. He's young. Let's bring him in. He's got a great mind as far as how to generate revenue. And so now he's over all of our sales and marketing, and we have really big people that we have on our staff that on retainers, and we brought all of our marketing in-house. And when we did that, we brought all of our marketing in-house. We've got some very big people on our board on retainers that are marketing specialists, you're talking Fortune 100 companies, CMOs from Fortune 100 companies now. Pay them a lot of money to be on retainer, but they came in and taught Marco and our social media team those skills. And last month alone, we booked 4,000 sales calls in 1 month.
That's fantastic.
You know how many companies that do that? Not many. They're Fortune 1000 companies or something. So
right.
That's really obviously expanded our growth rate. So you bring in the people that kind of have the same mission and they want to go down the same path. And you have products and services that really solve people's problems. You get massive results and you have the marketing behind it. It's pretty much impossible not to really scale your company at that point. You'd have to make a lot of mistakes not to be able to scale. So hopefully that helps. So I'm gonna run in a second. I know you got a meeting, but man, it was awesome.
Fantastic. How can people find out more about you and 7th Level online?
Yeah, just have them go to that free Facebook group.
Sure. Salesrevolution.pro.
Salesrevolution.pro. Salesrevolution.pro, because they're going to get some resources there. And then if they want more advanced training, like our clients have, many of them are in the same industry as who you have your podcast. They can just message me directly in that Facebook group, and somebody on my team will message them back, and they can always book with one of our account people to go over different training options we have for their industry for sure.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. Really enjoyed the conversation.
You're the man, dude. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks again to Jeremy for coming on the show and sharing your insights, strategies, and resources. Learn about Jeremy, 7th Level, and the NEPQ process at 7thlevelhq.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. Please subscribe and follow us at saasfuel.com. It's always free. And everyone who subscribes this week will receive a little rock hammer. Use it to break out of whatever is holding you back. Join us next week for our SaaS founder conversation with Marcin Chacon, founder and co-CEO of PriceFX, an international next-generation pricing solution with more than $100 million raised and clients in 40 countries. With old, outdated pricing solutions made for the few, PriceFX brings pricing to the people. And people are at the center of the PriceFX culture. Wait till you hear about the Red Shoes Around the World tour. It is fantastic idea. That is Tuesday. Then next Thursday on our SaaS Fuel Expert series, we have Becca Kay, co-founder and COO of Dingus and Zazie. You heard that right, Dingus and Zazie. It's an unlimited marketing subscription that companies can hire for less than the cost of a full-time employee. Be sure to check that out next week. And until next time, remember, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of all things, and no good thing ever dies. See you next time. As always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.
Let's go!